Hello, brothers and sisters out there, non-binary, non-gendered trannies and everything. Hello, John the Morgile here, checking in for a new static planar Earth video for you. I hope you do enjoy it. This is going to be a bit of a curveball. I mean, we're definitely going to talk some flat Earth facts, as I love to do, but this one's going to take a bit of a spiritual twist. So I really do hope you pay attention to the end, and feel free to reach out to me later on with questions or comments. I'd love to speak with you about it and see what you think. So let's start with a rhetorical question. What is the importance of truth if nobody sees it, understands it, or even believes it? If the majority of people actually defend themselves from the truth at all costs and attack the person telling them the truth, should we still try to help them see it? What's the point? Many people are under the belief that certain topics should be left well enough alone, as revealing certain deceptions to others will just disrupt the balance of the hard-won and fragile peace which our society can barely sustain as it is. And even if we're correct about this truth, what difference does it make, really, in the grand scheme of things? You know, if people believe a lie or understand the bona fide truth, what difference does it make at the end of the day? According to most people, none whatsoever. Well, I'll say the deception which we're faced with is unlike any other deception our world has faced in all of known history. There have been, and will be, certainly, other very insidious and powerful lies which act as the lifeblood for the hidden, wicked spiritual forces in high places. For example, the deception involving fiat currency, or the institutionalized paradigm involving evolution, and others, but the deception involving the static plane truth is unique in several respects. For one, our culture has written laws to ensure that all children are forced to espouse concepts involving the heliocentric yarn as young as possible. You know, if you don't put your kids through federally approved curriculum, they'll literally start arresting people for truancy violations, right? And, you know, there's certainly a globe in every classroom, even, kindergarten and preschools have globes in them, so they start young. And, you know, even children who've never even set foot in a classroom have certainly caught glimpses of the occasional sci-fi fantasy flick involving space travel and aliens from other planets and spacecraft. Helpless and innocent children are convinced under duress in the school system, however, an absolutely absurd and illogical concept which falls apart under the slightest bit of scrutiny. They're forced to believe that that is the legitimate truth under duress with no chance to fight back against it. Human beings are, if nothing else, curious creatures who really do need to understand their place in the scheme of things, or their place in the universe, in order to get our bearings on who we are and where we're going. The standard narrative, alliance, would have us believe that we are all evolved from monkeys, and that our intellect and discerning nature is merely the result of millions of years of evolution. It's incidental. Could have been intelligent, and we could all be bumbling idiots, smacking our butts all day long instead of talking, right? Could have gone either way in evolution. Any concept that we might have of love or spiritualism or even a higher power, these are all ultimately fantasies, according to Lyons. Fantasies created by well-meaning, deluded ideologues in order to give us a false sense of purpose and meaning to this thing called life. This spinning planet is merely an incidental conglomeration of chemical potentialities which just so happened, by chance, to meet the criteria to support living organisms. Forget the fact that nobody has ever witnessed life spontaneously come into existence by accident. Even under lab settings, they've tried for hundreds of years to be sure, and you just simply can't make life spontaneously occur because of chemical reactions. It doesn't happen. In fact, for all of their genetic bravado, scientists in a lab can't even create a single seed or a single cell from scratch. So, really, a single seed of a plant is a miracle, the mystery of which is beyond the capability of science to replicate. So, that definitely says something. And of course, according to these assholes, there are millions and millions of other worlds just in our galaxy alone. By the way, the galaxy was invented in the 1930s or 1940s by a man named Hubble. I'll read from this slide here that I created for you. So in 1924, Alwyn Hubble postulated that the spiraling lights in the distant night sky were actually other galaxies filled with suns and planets and their moons. This theory was quickly dubbed as fact and taught as such forever. His theory is, of course, beyond our ability to confirm or falsify, blending it as exactly pseudoscience, but it does further the Copernican yarn, so it's pleasing to the scientists. And of course, that is the opposite of science. Anyway, millions and millions of planets just in our so-called galaxy. So if we're clever enough, we can really just utterly destroy this world as sort of a practice experimental world. Really just an unfortunate byproduct of our advancement towards the stars on our way to some other bigger and better world out there that we can just completely destroy later on in the infinitude of space beyond the stars, where humanity will be like a virus infecting planet after planet if the scientists had their druthers, and of course if the heliocentric paradigm were actually true. If this world is temporal and disposable and eventually will die one day, then one person's life is certainly less critical in the grand scheme of things than the world. And in the grand scheme of things, the world really isn't all that much. I mean, it's just a speck of dust orbiting a mediocre at best star. So, definitely nothing special about this world according to scientism. All of human history, really, when viewed through the nihilistic lens of the Copernican paradigm, is tantamount to a giant anthill, which, regardless of how clever the ants might be, their little anthill world will eventually fall away to the laws of entropy, and even the sun, which gives us our life energy, will one day burn out, thanks to hot atomic nuclear fusion running its course. Of course, hot atomic fusion is merely theoretical, and even if such a process could be shown in a lab, it wouldn't necessarily correlate to the sun. But I guess the point that I'm making here is that, well, the sun is a mystery, and science explains it away with a process that is merely a theory, and yet this sort of tentative guesswork is labeled as scientific fact in the textbooks. Yet again, another example of pseudoscience masquerading as actual science. And it is worth mentioning that the term theoretical physics is an oxymoron. It's a contradictory term. Theoretical implies tentative or imaginary, and physics implies something measurable and tangible. So, literally, the phrase theoretical physics cancels itself out. Go figure. But that's what's going on up there in the heavens, according to mathematical wizards of science. So it is imperative, really, that we find a way off of this planet and inhabit one of the other many available planets in our general vicinity. Even if we do have to terraform a bit, right? We can make it work. Really, back in the 1950s, before any man had ever even claimed to visit space, the propaganda arm of the entertainment industry had dubbed that era, and the eras to follow, the space age, believe it or not, and filled people's heads with the illusion of space travelers probing the infinite void full of limitless worlds. Star Trek, Lost in Space, Star Wars, etc., etc. They made it seem like an unavoidable certainty that mankind is destined to leave the cocoon of planet Earth and eventually colonize the stars while befriending all sorts of alien life forms along the way, ALF certainly notwithstanding. NASA and its predecessor agencies were literally spun up by Nazi propaganda masters who knew full well that the only thing better than some awesome technology or weapon is the profound and widespread popular belief that said technology or weapon is within their arsenal. So it's just as well to have some weapon or technology as it is to have people believe that you do have it, right? Doesn't make a difference to them. Of course, history wasn't very kind to the German people and the Nazis, so there is some debate to be had there, I think, but the Nazis were hated, definitely hated unanimously by the American people of that era, right? So the government didn't openly bring Nazis over to work in high-paying positions of the government and NASA and such. Of course, they did it secretly via clandestine operations like Project Paperclip, wherein thousands of high-ranking Nazi geniuses were secretly smuggled into the United States and Russia in order to suck up the brightest minds and potential technologies and propagandists of the Third Reich in order to work their magic in the realm of science, technology, etc. in the years to come. A shining example would be people like Wernher von Braun, who were indeed brilliant engineers, but they were also arguably more so brilliant when it came to the realm of propaganda. And just in case you don't recognize him, that is Wernher von Braun working with Walt Disney on space propaganda, of course. Now, had the American people known at the time what our government was doing in the vein of Operation Paperclip and other such fuckery, they would have flipped their shit, to be sure. My grandfather, God love him, he was a great man, gentle, loving, highly intelligent, great grandfather, right? Loved the guy. God rest his soul. He fought in World War II and in Korea, so he was of that generation for sure. Now, in spite of his wisdom and logical sensibility as a civil engineer, he would often use the term Nazis as the lowest possible insult against a group or a person. And if an entire country was disagreeable, he would often say, nuke the bastards. That was his go-to argument for just all sorts of people that he disagreed with. Nuke the bastards, right? Love to say that. Of course, nuclear bombs are a very closely linked offshoot of the space race farce and the Nazi orchestration of our trajectory as a scientific nation. Nuclear bombs, newsflash, nuclear bombs simply do not exist and could not possibly exist. Now, before we get started in this vein, I know everybody's knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, of course there's nuclear bombs, John. I've seen it on TV. And of course, when you dig into that a bit, you'll find clips like this one, where you clearly see soldiers standing in front of what appears to be a nuclear blast. And for this sort of effect, it appears that the military just compiled many tons of TNT or equivalent explosives in one place and detonated it. The older hydrogen bombs were measured in kilotons, which literally is the equivalent of like 1,000 tons of TNT, right? And so the military certainly has limitless supplies of TNT, which good sources have reported that they actually detonated such things in order to create certain illusions of nuclear bombs. Now you have other clips like this where they're clearly using models, right? I mean, they'll intercut real buildings with real people, and then they'll cut that together with scale models being destroyed. And that was pretty cleverly done for the time, but I don't think it stands up to the standards of today. Of course, they did have the wherewithal to invent cameras that are nuclear bomb-proof, as you can see in certain clips here, that the camera that is clearly just a few dozen feet from this house is being destroyed by the blast. somehow manages to survive the nuclear blast completely unscathed. And if you know what to look for, you can clearly tell that they're using models to create the illusion of nuclear bombs. Of course, they have lots of other tricks in their arsenal, and they pulled out all the stops when it came to selling the illusion of nuclear bombs to the public of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, of course. And once they did that, they had it made, because now they could really do whatever they wanted in the name of classified national security and get away with practical murder. But I always urge everyone to do their own research, but that is one thing I can say with absolute definite surety, that if you're one of those people that worries about, nuclear holocaust, that's one thing that certainly is never going to happen. Sure, the governments and the militaries of the world have the capability to blow shit up, but it's not going to come in the form of nuclear bombs. That's just a fantasy that will certainly never happen. And again, I urge anyone to delve down that vein and research it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it, but I'm 100% convinced that it's nothing more than propaganda and fear porn. This isn't to say that the military can't blow stuff up expertly, which they can, but the concept of a single, relatively lightweight, small portable bomb capable of destroying entire cities at once is just a fear porn myth designed to garner control over the masses and convince people that the only safe path towards the future with nuclear arsenals in it is a big, powerful government and, of course, a bigger military with bigger and more nuclear bombs than the other guy, right? That was the propaganda, and boy, did it work. Of course, the Russian nuclear race was equally brilliant. Nazis strategized, no doubt. Exercise of the Hegelian dialectic, wherein the mere belief in the concept of nuclear bombs was in fact enough to hurl the two superpowers of the USA and Russia into a never-ending expansion of our military presence and the relinquishment of our civil liberties for the sake of public safety in the face of potential nuclear war. The military can get away with all kinds of evil and unsavory things simply by stating that their work is classified and it's a matter of national security. And, if you people dig too deep and impede these crazy assholes too much, our next lesson might come in the form of a mushroom cloud, which, of course, nobody wants, even though it's a pile of bullshit. At the end of the day, the propaganda pushed on the baby boomer generation was super heavily laced with nuclear bomb fear porn, to be sure. And the escapism of space travel and sci-fi fantasy certainly didn't suffer for that, right? Now, I say nuclear bombs simply cannot exist because their concept involves splitting an atom, which is a hypothetical sort of particle. Splitting this atom causes a chain reaction which has devastating effects in theory. But if atoms don't actually exist, then how can you split one, right? How can you split something that doesn't exist? Atoms are merely an extension of the heliocentric scientism, wherein the smallest building blocks of all matter are simply microscopic little solar systems which we cannot see or measure. You can't feel them. You really wouldn't never know they were there. But of course, you have the protons and neutrons in the center, which is sort of like a sun, and then the different rings of electrons, which sort of behave as planets in this sort of analogy. They basically filled everything up with little heliocentric models, right? If it wasn't bad enough that, they convinced everyone that we live on a spinning ball in space, well, you have a bunch of little spinning balls in space inside of you too, right? And that's literally what they say. They say that, that table in front of you is mostly empty space, and the distance betwixt two atoms in that table is comparable to the distance between two stars in a galaxy, right? I mean, they really do lay it on thick when it comes to ball Earth bullshittery. But of course, the smallest building blocks of all matter are simply microscopic solar systems, which we cannot see or measure, but they must be there because science tells us so. And scientists are never wrong because, well, dude, they just science too damn well. Of course, nuclear power is very real, but it has nothing to do with atomic theory, unfortunately. So, if you take a radioactive isotope like uranium and tightly encase it in a very sturdy metal structure, it naturally generates heat. And really, heat is all you need to run turbines and generators. So that heat is then used, transferred into usually something like water, liquid, but it's used to spin turbines and ultimately generate energy, much like steam power. Really, you could have named it steam power 2.0 rather than nuclear power, but nuclear power has such a subliminal suggestion that lends credence to nuclear bombs, so definitely call it nuclear power, of course. Now, in a nuclear reactor, the biggest problem is keeping this dynamo cool. Really, that's the biggest job for somebody running a nuclear reactor, is to make sure everything stays cool. And if you fail to do so, you're going to get what's called a nuclear meltdown. So nothing explodes in a mushroom cloud, but this runaway train of heat will begin to melt its container, and the container containing that container, and then the earth below it, and a chain reaction ensues which will leave the area allegedly radioactive for many years. Of course, even that's debatable. I mean, look at Chernobyl, where the radiation levels are practically nil. I mean, there's trace radiation levels, but there's plants and animals growing and living there, so it's not like 10,000 years of desolate salt of the earth, right? The point is, nuclear power is a misnomer, cleverly designed to subliminally, like I said, lend credence to the concept of nuclear bombs. If nuclear power is obviously real, then nuclear bombs, by extension, must also be real. Duh. This really is the oldest trick in the Lientific book, where anti-scientific nonsense masquerades as some real, practical scientific technology, sort of hides behind it in name only, and is thus instantly given a place in our belief system as obvious and real and scientifically proven. Another example of this trickery is the concept of satellites. So just to give you some examples, satellites are what make our cell phones work, and our televisions use satellites to bring us all kinds of porn to any device we choose. And you believe the Earth is flat. So what is NASA doing with all those satellites orbiting the ball Earth then, huh? Of course, back in the 1940s, I know for sure, because my grandfather told me, that the US military was using high-altitude weather balloons for the exact same applications that are attributed to satellites, for a fraction of the cost, decades before satellites were even, claimed to be in use. Everything from cell phones, televisions, porn, GPS, and all the technologies said to be reliant upon satellites could, and indeed are, supported by advanced arrays of high-altitude weather balloons. For starters, satellites are claimed to be literally thousands of miles in altitude, rendering their functionality as useless, since there are definite range restrictions and path loss restrictions to radio frequency-based technologies. I'm sorry, but you just can't send a RF signal 20,000 miles even through space. That's not how that works. Especially not when the satellite has the power output capacity as a frickin' toaster, right? It's not going to happen. The exact same technologies attributed to satellites can indeed are supported by high-altitude balloons for a fraction of the cost, a fraction of the risk, with a much better chance of success, even in theory, humoring the practicality of satellites in the first place, which is just absurd. The weather balloons, which are used to function as satellites, are equipped with thousands of pounds of equipment that you just can't launch into space and equip onto satellites. It's just too expensive, too heavy. They don't claim to be able to put up thousands of pounds on a satellite, right? They make them as light and as gennaro as possible. These balloons have the ability to remain completely stationary, geostationary in quotes, or travel to relatively far remote locations depending on the need for that particular satellite, aka weather balloon. It's funny, but a few years ago I found a great video that shows what is obviously a communication satellite attached to a weather balloon that has crash landed somewhere in South America. And these people, have their cell phones filming it, and the thing's beeping the whole time, and like these gadgets are lighting up and stuff, and it's just a great video. When I found that video a few years ago, I had seen it online and remembered it when I was creating a video. I thought it would be very useful, so I typed in a description of what I saw in the video in YouTube, and it popped right up. Downloaded it, used the clip in my video, fine, worked great. Now, honestly, I can't even find a picture of such a thing anywhere. So if anybody out there knows which one I'm talking about, please, share a link with me and let me know, because I would love to have that clip again. But of course, 10, 15 years ago, YouTube was fully capable of locating an old obscure video based on a description of it in the search terms. And now, videos that I was able to find before are simply just not findable, because of course the internet is losing its functionality in order to censor flat earthers from making too much damn sense on the internet, I guess. I don't know. If one or two of them fall out of the sky every month, there are thousands of others to replace them. Typically, they will fall into the ocean if they do eventually fall, or to some obscure area out in the, Siberia. But every so often, actual satellite balloons will land in places where people document them. The clever military unashamedly even claimed that UFOs that people were allegedly reporting, like in Roswell, New Mexico and the like, were actually weather balloons. What better way to cover up a alien spacecraft than to call it a weather balloon? And what better way to cover up a weather balloon than to call it an alien satellite, right? I mean, it kind of goes both ways, I guess. But the cost of launching just a single satellite is allegedly, according to NASA, just astronomical. Just millions and millions and millions of dollars. And if there's one thing that NASA needs you to know, is that it's hard to be NASA. The cost of launching 10 weather balloons is comparatively, well, it's like peanuts. Nothing. Maybe $100,000 for all 10, if that. So what exactly has NASA been doing with all that extra money, which they don't actually need for satellites, because space doesn't exist and satellites are a lie? Well, here's the thing. Money doesn't actually exist. It's a fiction. It really doesn't hold any value. So NASA, they're just fine with maybe even just burning the extra money, as they don't need to earn money in any honest sense. It's money well spent if they just burn it, as long as people actually believe that our modern civilization is heavily reliant upon satellites to survive with our beloved comforts and technologies and porn sent to any device at any time, right? It's job security for NASA if people believe that satellites are a necessity for their comfort and technology. And of course, if people understand that it is hard to be NASA. This ensures that their future, NASA's future, is filled with blank checks and no-bid contracts, which will also, as sort of a side benefit, pigeonhole the world's brightest minds down the garden path to nowhere for generations to come, right? I mean, we couldn't have smart people dealing with anything of real import. Make sure that they're into space technologies. Designing satellites which will be built for millions of dollars and then launched into the ocean. In other words, it's better to take $1 million, spend a tenth of that on a dozen weather balloons to achieve the required bandwidth and connectivity, and then burn the other 900,000 to keep the illusion going that everybody needs NASA. Like, we really can't have anything without NASA. You can't have cell phones, you can't have TV, can't have satellite TV, can't have cable, can't have porn sent to your phone, can't have GPS without NASA, right? That's the key. If there's one thing that NASA does with a finesse unseen, unparalleled anywhere, is to create the illusion that they are an integral part of our modern society, and without their efforts, we would just be back in the Stone Age in no time. Anyone who knows how radio frequency-based technologies work will agree that a satellite traveling at thousands of miles per hour, thousands of miles away, with the electrical power output on par with a household toaster, is nothing compared to an array of high-tech weather balloons with a payload of thousands of pounds hovering perfectly still just a few dozen miles in altitude, behaving as a giant transceiver or an array of transceivers, which can easily be maintained by periodically servicing one or two balloons as necessary. The geostationary satellites are claiming to be like 20,000 miles in altitude. And could you imagine trying to send a radio frequency shot 20,000 miles and then getting anything but static back in return? And again, that's send and receive, so really it's 20,000 miles there and 20,000 miles back. And it has to travel through, well, mostly empty space, but then it's going to hit the upper layers of the atmosphere, in theory, and then bounce around in there, and then go travel another 20,000 miles back up to the satellite. So you're talking about round-trip shots of RF waves of 40,000 miles, not experiencing any path loss, not experiencing anything but crystal clear digital imagery. And we all know that's just obviously bullshit, right? I mean, it's clearly, like, when you think about it, it's just nonsense, especially when you realize that, again, the technology was already in place with weather balloons to support all of the technologies that satellites are claimed to support. So they're not even really necessary. So why would you take all these unnecessary steps to launch satellites to achieve something that's already been achieved with weather balloons? And of course, really the only argument that they can come up with is, well, the curvature of the Earth. You see, if you put satellites, really, you're only ever going to need one or two, maybe three satellites ever. You can get around the curve of the Earth with satellites. Well, newsflash, the Earth doesn't even have curvature, so even that argument is baloney, right? The truth is, satellites were completely unnecessary when they were dreamed up by sci-fi author Arthur C. Clarke, no less. But they are a necessary component of this deception, as it gives real teeth to the pontificates of scientism. I mean, NASA is truthfully, completely inept and useless. Just absolute waste of space, waste of money, waste of flesh. Just useless. The inventions which do come out of NASA are all patented by men who are not astronauts, but are instead just regular dudes on NASA's payroll who live on the ground and have never even claimed to go to space. Those are the guys that are patenting inventions for NASA. They don't need to be pretending to fly around in space in order to invent these things, is my point. Of course, the position of astronaut is reserved for a very specific breed of liars who are perfectly happy getting paid well and getting the international fame and recognition for pretending to float around in space and lying about it, when in fact they're just pretending to be in orbit. Now, not everyone is capable of such hubris, and as such, all astronauts are necessarily Freemasons. If you do your research, you'll find that 99 out of 100 astronauts come from the annals of Freemasonry, who are a secret society who swear an oath to the lodge above and beyond country or creed. The lodge is where their allegiance lies, and they are bound by blood oaths to not reveal the lodge's secrets and to lie, if necessary, to protect the lodge. And of course, not all Freemasons are astronauts, so I'm sure NASA has come up with some vetting process to make sure that very specific breeds of Freemasons are plucked from the deepest annals of scoundrels available to the masters of Freemasonry. And let's be honest, there's a lot of scoundrels in Freemasonry. I mean, I'm sorry to say, not all Freemasons are necessarily scoundrels. Most of them are really just useful idiots to the lodge. But thousands of honest, well-meaning people apply and try to become astronauts and have dreams of becoming an astronaut one day, but only a few are picked each year, if even every year. Now, of course, astronauts are not the brightest, nor the strongest, nor the best spoken, but the most shit-tastic, to be sure. I'll tell you, there's a special place in hell for those liars, but I will reserve the possibility that they are given hypnotically suggested false memories and they actually believe that they traveled to space. I mean, that is actually possible, but the mistakes that NASA made originally with the Apollo crew, you remember the press conference with Drunkle Buzz and Neil Armstrong and Tim Collins, where their body language just screams that they're lying, and they basically are very withdrawn and depressed. Prior to traveling to the moon, just excited as all get out, just couldn't contain themselves. Upon returning to Earth, after being the first dudes to ever travel to the moon and walk on it, well, they all appeared to have been through a string of dead puppies and kittens, like all their cats and dogs died every day for a week, judging by their demeanor. These guys are really super depressed and barely wanted to talk about it, just answered the bare minimum on questions about their trip to the moon. So at that point, NASA must have decided to possibly only allow psychopathic tendencies into space, as a psychopath would have no problem lying his or her ass off about going to space, so long as attention and praise is on them and they get to feel smarter than everybody. You wouldn't even have to pay a psychopath to do that. They'd do it for free. But you couple that with the fact that they are from the Lodge of Freemasonry. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but Freemasons are into some pretty weird stuff, man. You do have the Blue Lodge, which is the first 3 degrees, and these guys, they are, like I said, they're useful idiots. They don't understand the true goals or intents of the lodge, and it's set up that way on purpose. In fact, prolific writers of Freemasonry state that the Blue Lodge neophytes are given the illusion that they have a firm understanding of Freemasonry, when in fact they have been completely misled about Freemasonry. And honestly, I do think that one of the biggest secrets of Freemasonry is Spinning Ball Earth. It's all over their symbols and artwork. And of course, not every Freemason is going to figure this out. Only a handful of them would figure it out, and maybe that's a prerequisite for becoming an astronaut. I don't know. But there's one definite thing: these guys are not flying around in space, right? That's for sure. It's so funny because one of the big pieces of evidence of NASA fakery is during the alleged spacewalks, you can see the astronauts emitting bubbles, like they're actually in an underwater tank pretending to be in space, and so sometimes you can see bubbles in space. Well, nowadays, if you search the internet for air bubbles in space, you'll get images of the astronauts inside the ISS playing with bubbles of water in space. So this is clear evidence of active suppression of information on the part of companies like Google and ABC and so forth. Of course, the CEO of YouTube or Google One did a whole press conference where they bragged about suppressing flat earth content from the masses. So they're not even hiding the fact that they're doing this, but it is sort of interesting to see it in play in all the different forms, right? A few years ago, if you searched for air bubbles in space, you'd find all sorts of videos and images of astronauts being busted faking space. Like, it was obvious proof. Now, in the future, when you search those same keywords, you'll find prescribed images a la NASA's PR team that shows them purposefully faking space within the ISS by, showing how they're weightless they are by creating bubbles of water. Of course, they run the gambit in terms of trick photography. We won't even get into that. That's a whole nother video. But they even go so far as to what appears to be real-time CGI rendering in a 3D rendered environment that's interactive with the astronaut, the liar. And of course, when you image search bubbles in space, you will definitely stumble across this gem of a meme. I'm still thinking of a caption for it, so maybe I'll come up with something clever, maybe not. But of course, it's bubbles in space. And that reminded me that the Trailer Park Boys, if you haven't watched the show, it's on Netflix. It's basically like this real underground sort of cheesy B Canadian show that if you actually get into it a little bit, it's really hilarious in some ways, and it's the sort of campiness and stupidity of the whole thing that has its charm. It's all very serendipitous because I was actually just sort of binging a few episodes of Trailer Park Boys the other day on Netflix, just recently. Haven't seen the show in years, and then I was reminded of this clip that I did actually catch a couple years back, and I'd totally forgotten about. So, but anyway, roll this clip, and I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't seen it, it's you'll love it. So here we go. Trailer Park Boys.
Mick West. Who the fuck is Mick West?
Mick West.
Why you?
I got watching these people that believe the Earth is flat.
Finally, there's
What?
fucking proof of it. I've known. My fucking dad knew that years ago.
Ricky, don't start on the Earth is flat bullshit.
It is. There's proof.
No, there
proof.
isn't, Ricky.
There's no proof. Oh, I've found proof.
There's no proof that the Earth is flat. Define proof. Let's talk about what the word proof means. Do you know what proof is?
It's like when you're right.
No.
No. You're trying to get to that. Being right.
Proof.
You need proof.
Well, I know what it means in liquor. Like if you get an 80 proof, it means it's 40%.
Right. That's not what I
Yes.
mean.
Not that kind
Scientific proof.
Right, that's what they've got somewhere. It says. There's a fucking, it's not, it makes sense if it's flat. There's a big wall of ice around it.
Ricky,
It's flat with
It's a dome. It's a dome. And the sun's closer than we all thought, too, and it's smaller.
What?
Yep.
he's been watching the fucking videos.
Is that what they're saying?
The flat Earth people say the fucking Earth is a flat disc
All right.
surrounded by an ice wall that's a couple
Wow.
100 feet high, and that's what holds the oceans in. And a lot of them say there's a fucking big dome over it.
Yep.
There's a big ice wall.
An ice wall surrounds the perimeter.
That is-
That's what
that
holds
is
the oceans
fucking-
in.
That's not.
And the picture of the Earth looks a lot different. I think it's Australia
Yeah.
up here and the Americas of North and South down here.
Ricky's talking about the map that you see on the United Nations logo. He thinks that's the actual map of the world.
Anyway, when I knew for sure, 100,000% it was true, this guy's on the rambling, and I'm like, I'm starting to believe it. He goes, if you really, really want to believe, try to book a flight from the Southern Americas to the Australias.
Yeah.
Qantas, man. You can fly.
I don't know.
Qantas
I couldn't
that way.
find one. They're there, but you try to get on, and they're like, no.
Oh, yeah.
Error,
Look at this.
error.
Look at this. Computer.
Oh,
Dead.
man, no. No, don't say it's true.
Dead. She died.
Oh, man, oh, man.
This is not good.
Put
boys.
it in a
Let
bucket of
let it
rice. We need a bucket of rice.
This is not good.
Or a bucket of ice. If it's dead, let's hear. Just be done
Let's
with it.
not
Oh, there we
be-
go.
There we
She's
go.
alive again.
She's back.
She's back.
Thank fuck. All right. So how many people out there believe there's, the Earth's flat? Is there a lot of
There's a
people?
lot.
I'll take
So
this
just when we
photograph.
thought there was
Thank you.
one Ricky on planet Earth,
Ricky, careful.
that might be a good thing to do, Bubs.
Here, you better control that, because I fucked things up. She's seeming pretty goddamn dry now. I don't know.
It's inside.
I saw some shit blast out of there that time.
Oh shit! That came out of this.
Yeah, man. It's okay. It'll dry us. Don't worry about it. It's me to do that.
Tip the laptop up.
Tip it up. Tip it up.
Tip
Bubs.
it up. We're getting instructions here. This is what you do if you ever spill beer on your laptop.
Doesn't smell as beery. All right, that might have worked.
All right. Good.
Yes. So anyway, there is a lot of people that believe this.
You spilled some more, Bubs.
What the
fuck is wrong with you guys?
I didn't know it was open. Who's leaving open beers laying around? Not me.
That was actually the one you spilled
Oh,
earlier.
fuck.
Oh, let's see. There we go again.
See,
Fuck,
sometimes you
boys.
forget
Keep
about
it together.
things. Okay, we're good. No more
See,
spillage.
that proves the Earth isn't flat right there, Ricky. Things
Oh.
are tipping over because we're on a curve.
Whatever.
So explain this one to me.
Okay.
If you get in a fucking airplane and you take off
Yo.
and you fly on the same heading,
Yes.
you will eventually come back to where you started. Explain the fuck.
No. Because of the way everything gets sucked to the middle of the flatness, you think you're flying in a straight line, but it's pulling you around. right?
Oh. Okay, so let's just say that was true. You're saying the gravity,
The magnet or whatever it is they set up.
gravity of the flat Earth is still at the center, pulling things to the center, correct?
I guess. I don't know how it works. I'm not a scientist.
Okay, so if that was true,
Yes.
then when you're standing in the center of the Earth,
You're
gravity is like this. But if you're on the outer edge,
Yes.
that means gravity's pulling you horizontally.
Well, it's kind of down, so it's sort of pulling you down to the center.
Oh, okay, so...
It might even be on the other side of the flatness with all the other dirt and everything else back there.
Yeah, what is on the other... So here's the flat Earth with the ice wall. What's on the underside?
Whatever they built it out of. It could be
who built
concrete
it?
or concrete or fucking... Maybe they put an insulation over it.
Who built it?
The aliens. We're all aliens. You guys know that, right? I've been reading a lot, boys, in the last few days. Pretty high.
Okay, so the aliens built a disc that we're on with a dome over it
Yeah.
and an ice wall.
Yeah.
So how come Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, how come they're all round? How come we got the flat one?
How do we know? We've never been there.
No, but they photographed them, Ricky, with the Hubble. How did the Hubble get out past the dome?
Didn't.
That's all made up?
Yep. So is the moon. They're all lights.
Oh my fuck. All right, there is flights from South America.
So when people witness a space shuttle
Bubs.
take off or a rocket take off from Cape Canaveral, where does it go?
That's why when you see it go up, it starts to go on a curve. Because it fucking goes on a curve until it's out of sight. And then they just cut to this, studio footage of, oh yeah, we're fucking up in space. Look at us go. Hey.
Oh my God. So all the astronauts are just...
Actors. Actronauts.
Actronauts.
Oh my God. I can't wait to see Chris Hadfield. Can't wait to see Chris Hadfield and tell him that my buddy thinks he's an actor.
I can't wait to see him either and say, nice try, bud. Didn't fool me,
So
though.
Chris Hadfield has never been to space, is what you're telling me?
Never. No one has.
Oh,
No one
my God,
has.
Ricky.
No.
Ricky, you got to stop smoking whatever it is you've been smoking lately. Because it's actually frying your fucking brains now.
Whatever else happened on this day?
So we're just going to leave that one, are we? Leave it as flat
Well,
Earth?
you know what? Everybody believes what everyone believes.
Ricky.
Trailer Park Boys, everyone. So, hope you like that clip. And, wow. I laughed out loud, literally, not even just saying it, a few times during that. So, kudos to those guys, man. If you've never seen the show, it probably didn't do much for you. But if you were ever a fan of the show or, binge watched it a little bit here and there, that Bubbles, boy, I'll tell you. But who would have ever thought that in searching for bubbles in space, that is what you come up with, right? But the fact that the internet technology companies are going to such lengths in order to hide the truth about flat Earth from people that are really looking for it. I mean, okay, I can sort of understand them shielding the unwashed masses from stumbling upon it, which of course they do. But somebody that's already, lit with the flat Earth bug, looking for, pictures and videos, has a hard time finding it anymore because they have intentionally obscured the topic, which is a huge shame, and it's an affront to one of our biggest tools of the modern day, which is of course the internet. And the internet should be free of such censorship, but of course it gets more and more Orwellian and tyrannical by the day. And of course they're paying a couple of guys at Google $250,000 a year apiece to make sure that you don't find this video that you're watching right now. So thank God you found it, and those guys really suck at their job. Okay, so the satellite and the nuclear bomb are just a couple more fictions coughed forth from the bowels of scientism and Freemasonry. But these two things, for example, are really just extensions of the ball Earth nonsense, in truth. Satellites only have the potential to exist in an infinite space setting, heliocentric universe, and nuclear bombs rely upon theories which find their basis in the Copernican sort of mindset, for sure. The master, Yeshua, the good shepherd, warned us that all the sins that one can commit, intentionally deceiving children is something which will get you in deep shit with the Holy Spirit. I believe he said it would be better to have a millstone tied to your neck and be cast into the sea than it would be for one to knowingly deceive a child. Which is, of course, why the Christian religion is inherently tied to Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, right? Just two outright ridiculous lies we Christians tell our children in order to remember Christ's birth and resurrection, right? Of course, it makes perfect sense. This is a perfect illustration of how Christ's endeavors have been twisted beyond recognition in our modern day by the church coming in his name. In fact, I remember as a youngster serving as an altar boy at St. George Orthodox Church in Orlando for many years, that, the goat herders of the Fertile Crescent of thousands of years ago, these idiots thought the earth was flat. So what can they possibly teach me about God? I know the earth's a spinning ball. These guys thought the earth was flat and they're trying to teach me about spiritual stuff? Good luck to them. And for a religion which claims to be about truth, lying to their children about Santa and the Easter Bunny, as a small child, I remember I certainly assumed that when it was revealed to me that Santa wasn't real and neither was the Easter Bunny, then the character of Christ, by sort of logical extension, must also be just another lie in that same vein. Didn't even have to ask, like, oh, Santa's not real? Cry. What about the Easter Bunny? No, he's not real either. Cry some more. At that point, I'm not even going to ask about, the guy that turns water into wine. Don't even bother asking. Clearly, he's just another made-up thing. So, I think that's by design. And I think that it is the church, which was, put together by the people that murdered Christ, the Hebrew hierarchy and the Roman society. They're the ones that put him to death, so of course they'd be the best ones to oversee his namesake and his religion, of course. Makes perfect sense, yeah. And just make sure that if there's a murderer out there who goes around killing people, you better make sure he's able to write those people's biography, write their eulogy, and say a nice speech at their funeral, of course. So, and actually, it took me years as just a little kid to come to terms with the idea that, okay, so Santa and the Easter Bunny aren't real, but that didn't have anything to do with Christ. I mean, I just, I literally took it for granted that it was all just a bunch of bull for the longest time. If you don't realize that the church is about as anti-Christian as one can possibly get, and Christ, if he were walking the earth today, I bet you he would be turning over tables at the so-called Christian churches, rebuking the priests for capitulating to scientism and diddling little boys, and capitulating to the secular paradigm. He would be rebuking parents, of course, for lying to their children as a ritual to celebrate his birthday, which happens to be the solstice, yet another trace of the Roman Empire replacing Saturnalia and a pantheon of gods with Christianity for practical purposes. So like the statue of Ishtar just became the statue of Mary in the Roman temples, and bada bing, bada boom, now it's a Christian church because we slapped the Christian name on it. And of course, the Roman Catholic Church diluted the Christian message so thoroughly that really only tattered glimpses of Christ remain. And let's not forget, the so-called Protestant churches absolutely follow suit with the Catholic Church because their approved dogma is the KJV book, which the KJV book is a product of Rome, and I would go so far as to say the Hebrew hierarchy, which was responsible for murdering Christ again. So the Most High, the creator of all things, I'm here to tell you, is very real. His signature is in every cell of our body in the form of DNA code. Everybody knows you must have a coder to write a code. Complex code doesn't just manifest out of accidents, right? It doesn't happen like that. And of course, every mystery of the heavens in the form of the handiwork shown in the firmament, the stars, the wandering stars, the sun, the moon, mysteries that only an entity far more powerful and intelligent than us could, dream of putting together. Modern scientism wants nothing more than to convince you and everyone else that God, the creator of all things, isn't real, and that the master, Yeshua Hermeshiach, the good shepherd, was just a man, if he even existed at all. Luckily, the demons responsible for bringing us the church and the KJV Bible are unable to create original thoughts, and they're only capable of twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. But there are, therefore, necessarily traces of the truth left in the book if you know how to find them. Now, we have some traces of the so-called Gnostic texts, which hold a lot of spiritual wisdom, and I believe those have also been tattered by time and men, but there are other sources like the Quran, which is also at its core so very similar to the roots of the Torah, it's just uncanny if you look into it, right? Who would have thunk? But most importantly, the truth of the Most High isn't written in any book, it's not in any religion, it's written in our hearts, it's written in our spirit. We were created in the image of God, and not that God has 2 arms and 2 legs, but his spirit, right? So during these very exciting times of revelation, we have become attuned to the frequency of the Holy Spirit, who is an awesome manifestation of the Most High God who created everything. I often credited one person or the other for bringing flat Earth to the forefront of our time, because honestly, I just don't see how this sort of revelation is possible for anyone to arrive at on their own accord. Just given the airtightness of the deception, the fact that they hit us with it so concretely when we're very young during our formative years, and even when you tell people the truth about the Earth being flat, they still don't believe you. So it really is a miracle that this thing has even come to, awareness, I think. But I no longer think that it was Eric Dubé who was responsible, or Math Powerland, or any of those guys who cracked open the flat Earth on social media. I'm here to tell you it was the Holy Spirit. So when you realize that everything that you believed about the world, the universe, yourself, and God, and everything, etc., was wrong and a deception, it is a little bit frightening at first. It'll definitely leave you a bit shaken, because it shows just how not figured out people out there actually do have it. Here all along, we thought that people pretty much had shit figured out, and it turns out really not so much at all. But at the same time, this realization is extremely liberating and motivating, as we can no longer believe some factoid that we're told just because smart science guy read it out of a book and says it with authority. We now know to view every dilemma through a new lens, which isn't afraid of making mistakes and couldn't care less about what other people think of us. For so long, we were inhibited by societal pressures and being ostracized by the group if we strayed too far from the normalson's paradigm. The reason I can say this with no regard for the repercussions is because I know that the punishment upon my immortal soul, if I fail to voice such things, is far more dire than any angst that I might receive from the deceived people who come in the name of Christ but are really of the devil unknowingly. Now, I know full well what the Master meant when he said, "I did not come here to bring peace, but to bring war and divide houses," or something like to that effect, right? This is because in order to exact real and meaningful change in such a bizarre and just utterly fucked up world that we find ourselves in, changing that is going to cause great volatility, for we are shining light in places which have been very dark indeed, and really have been off limits or socially taboo to even consider, or certainly to discuss. So my ancestors on my grandfather's side lived on a small island of the Mediterranean called Kalamata. They're famous for the olives, black olives with the pits still in them, not the green ones that have been pitted, but the real good. Love them, always have. But Kalamata was part of the kingdom of Sparta. My ancestors would have believed in a pantheon of gods for generations immemorial. Gods run by Zeus, and based their society around nothing but war. I mean, that was the most important thing in the Spartan society was, they were warriors. That's what they did. They were indeed very brutal people. My grandfather told me stories about how in ancient times they would take their infants at a certain age, I think maybe 2 or 3, and they would take them out at night and leave them in a flowing stream of cold water until sunrise. And when they returned the next day, if the child lived, then it was a Spartan, obviously. And if it died, well, then clearly it wasn't a Spartan. So they dodged a bullet there, and that's the way that they looked at it. That may sound callous, but again, they were breeding warriors, not They certainly weren't Christians, right? That was not in their mindset at all. Famously, the Spartans were honed as warriors from a very young age, and so to kill people in war was a very great honor for Spartans, but to die a violent death was just the sublime nirvana. That was heaven to the Spartans. To die in battle, I mean, there's no greater honor. That's what these guys live for. I mean, it's crazy to think about it, but, it appears that's how life was for them. And of course, they weren't absolute barbarians. I mean, so they cooked their food, and I'm sure they had redeeming qualities or whatever. They made wine and stuff, but these were not people who were going to be converted to Christianity by the likes of the witnesses of our time or the KJV Bible, for sure. For these people to alter their customs and belief system would have taken literal miracles. And one thing that boosts my faith tremendously is the fact that these people, or a group of these people at some point long ago in history, took on the surname of Son of Christ or City of Christ, Christopolis, which is my surname. So the apostles who visited with my ancestors, guided by the Holy Spirit, led by the Master, affected my ancestors in a spiritual sense so profoundly that these olive-loving, lamb-eating, bloodthirsty warrior pagans espoused the paradigm of Christ and forgiveness and ultimately the relationship with the one true God, the creator of all things, as opposed to a pantheon of small g gods that were followed by basically most ancient cultures. Now, in my opinion, the only possible way to do such a thing for a family of Spartans would have taken something amazing. I mean, first of all, have you ever worked with Greek people? I have, and they're just the most stubborn, stiff-necked, and opinionated people you'll ever want to meet. They're hard to work for because they're just, Greek people can be abrasive, let's just say that. And I say that in the most endearing way possible, but, really, did they actually resurrect the dead before their very eyes? Heal the blind, cast out demons? I believe so. I believe that the original Christian church was doing very profound things. And that is truly the only possible way that my ancestors would have included Christ in their name, by choice. I mean, let's not forget, they started counting the years all over again from one, based on the birthday of this dude, right? Nothing short of miracles. And remember, Christ preached forgiveness and loving your enemy. I mean, could you imagine pitching that message to a group of Spartans? That would have gotten you a short sword where the sun don't shine quick. Christ warned his followers of a time in the future where people would have awesome faith, even though they've never met him, and God was practically unknown to us. This generation that he spoke of would find themselves in a world so rich with delusion, deception, and temptation, and all the rest of the vices, where even the wisest among our elders were completely deluded with the world, and the church, which comes in his name, will be the whore of Babylon. In spite of a situation which seemed hopeless, the Holy Spirit would take root in the elect of this generation, putting us on the path towards bridging the gap between the fallen world and the kingdom of heaven, which is all around us, within us, and yet hidden from us by the deception of the flesh and the corporeal dying world around us. The only sure way to discern a true prophet from a false prophet is whether or not their prophecies come to pass. And I think we can all agree that the prophecy about a deception so great that it would fool the entire world, even the very elect, is something that we're experiencing being revealed to the world as we speak. And to me, that's pretty amazing, seeing how that prophecy was made however many thousands of years ago and is coming to pass right before our eyes. The Christian church of our day is wary of some deception which the government or some group might try to foist upon them in the future, not understanding that they've been living in this deception for their entire lives and for generations before their birth. The church that they identify with is a part of this deception. I mean, that's unthinkable to a modern Christian, and so they are almost impossible to reach with certain truths. The Great Deception has deceived the whole world for ages, generations, and we're just now, by some miracle, waking up to the fact that everything that we were taught was a lie, indeed a deception. Indeed, the wisdom of men is folly in the eyes of God. You know, that little parable has so much deeper meaning now than it ever did, doesn't it? The wisdom of men is folly in the eyes of God. Isn't that the truth? Newsflash, God created this world and the angels to serve us. Our place as human beings on this earth is a position of great power and responsibility to make even the archangels jealous of us. For we can mold the physical world to our will, but we only should do so when our will is aligned to the will of God. Free energy has been available at least since the 1940s, yet we still slave away to the brokers of fuel and electricity to make them rich at our expense. 90% of municipal water supplies are laced with a developmental neurotoxin called fluoride, another brainchild of the Nazi regime, allegedly. All this because some group of Ivy League cronycrats of yesteryear were paid to say, well, it might make our teeth a bit whiter, so put fluoride in everybody's drinking water forever. Even though we're aware that they're poisoning our water, and many people beg them to stop, they continue to do so unimpeded, no consequences, and they sleep great at night. Just sleep like babies. Of course, they have super expensive water softeners at their house, but that's besides the point. Our children's heads are filled with lies about the world, lies about themselves, lies about God every day, and we force them to do it because the world says that they have to go to school and it's good for them. And if you don't force your kids to go to school, somebody's going to jail for truancy. Our money supply was designed to siphon wealth away from the people into the hands of a very small few plutocrats who've been stealing our blood, sweat, and tears for over 100 years. And that is legal tender, and that's what's official. Marijuana is still illegal in most states, wherein a plant put here by God, created just after the foundations of the earth were laid, pot grows freely and plentifully and has no harmful effects, but hosts limitless benefits, will cause you to be locked up in a cell, your freedoms taken away from you potentially for years, your reputation tarnished permanently. And people disagree with this, but they will do nothing to change it because the law is all powerful. This is clear proof that the natural laws of the Creator are completely usurped and contradicted by the unnatural, evil laws of men. In order to punish you for possessing the wrong plant, the authorities of this world are enabled to break God's laws and inflict violence upon you to punish you for breaking the unjust and evil laws written by men. The physical, corporeal world is not the only game in town, people. The incorporeal spirit realm is very real, very powerful, and we as human beings are blessed with the unique position to operate in both the physical world and the non-physical realm of the spirit. Smoking pot and partaking in other such escapes actually improves our ability to let go of the physical restraints of the flesh and operate more openly in the realm of the spirit, where we belong. The Master's only direct commandment to his followers involves communion, which of course involves catching a buzz with your friends as you break bread, right? To make such a thing illegal is just absurd. Frankly, the Master probably wouldn't have needed to smoke a joint to get, on another level like that, but when you've been reared in this world that we find ourselves in, which was carefully designed to murder your spirit, the benefits to transcending the physical plane for a bit is a huge benefit for the spirit, and so of course you got to make it illegal and just lock up the people that do it because they're just can't have that, right? God's law is natural and is simple. It's the golden rule. Treat people as you would wish to be treated, as we're all of the same spirit within. So anything that you do negatively against your brother or your neighbor, really you're doing to yourself. So the psychopathic police can legally kidnap you, sexually assault you. Yes, they make you strip and touch yourself on intake. They can lock you up in a cage like an animal with the full blessing of society at large, simply because you had the wrong kind of salad in your pocket. I mean, that's insane. That is literally insane. The medical industry, which is supposed to improve people's health, and doctors even take oaths to do everything they can for their patients, has become a scam where money is the most important factor of a medical practice, and indeed, doctors prescribe treatments which often prolong the disease in order to profit from it. Now, I'm not saying that all doctors are evil. I'm saying the industry in general is set up as an evil industry. Look, for example, into B17 Laetrile for treatments for all sorts of cancers. Long story short, vitamin B17 is a vitamin. It's chemically similar to cyanide. Completely harmless and safe to ingest in the form of, say, apricot kernels, for example. The vitamin passes through the body harmlessly and it has some health benefits, but until it enters a cancer cell. Cancer is so devastating to our bodies because it hides in plain sight, pretending to be just a normal part of our body, so our immune system fails to attack it. You know, your immune system doesn't attack your own body, so the cancer pretends to be a part of your regular body. Now, the cell wall containing the cancer cells is very strong. Really, it's impenetrable to any sort of antibodies on the cellular level, and is thus the cancer's greatest strength, is the strength of its cell wall. It is also, however, sort of its Achilles heel, and it's its greatest weakness. So when the B17 enters into the cancer cell wall, it is then activated chemically by the nasty sort of toxins within the cancer cell, and a precipitation of cyanide is literally released within the cancer cell, completely isolated from the body of the patient by that cell wall, killing the cancerous tumorous tissue quickly with devastating effect, with practically no side effects other than one hell of a detox period. But it just annihilates cancer. A medical doctor, I forget his name, but it was back in the 1980s, he synthesized B17 called Laetrile, tested it on cancer patients with astonishing positive results. Of course, seeing this as a threat instead of a miraculous cure, the cancer industry will only use Laetrile treatments once chemo and radiation have been exhausted, practically destroying the patient's body in the process, leaving them on the brink of death and beyond the possibility of treatment. If the patient then requests it, they will try Laetrile, and so when the patient inevitably dies, really from the radiation and chemo, then they tally that as a failed outcome for the Laetrile, and in this fashion, the cure for cancer has been hidden by the very industry who is supposedly searching for a cure, all frantic and shit, daily and nightly, which is just another example of the state of this world being just completely ass backwards. Now, of course, I don't possess a doctoring degree, but I have lost friends to cancer, and really, I'll say it was the chemo and radiation that killed them. Much like scurvy being a vitamin C deficiency, in some sense, cancerous tumors are indeed a B17 deficiency. Of course, if you were to give a patient suffering with scurvy chemotherapy and radiation treatment before trying him out on a couple of oranges, surely you could then tally his death as a failed outcome for vitamin C treatment of scurvy and outlaw fucking oranges, right? So luckily, the cure for scurvy was discovered much to the chagrin of royalty at the time, who just refused to believe it. But it was discovered prior to the age of technological idiocracy, where the people responsible for curing diseases actually ensure that the cure is never shown the light of day. Isn't that just swell? So, honestly, there are no foods available in the United States which are naturally high in B17. You can, however, order apricot kernels online. I get the Hunza Gold apricot kernels from overseas. I don't have any stake in that. It's not like I get a nickel every time I say that, but that is what I buy. They taste good, taste like almonds, and eat a couple of them every day, and you never have to worry about cancerous tumors, according to me. You know, don't take medical advice from a crazy flat earther, but I'm here to tell you. But anyway, there's no foods in the U.S. that are high in B17 naturally, thanks to the devils at Monsanto and the like. They have genetically modified them to be kernel-free. So you have to special order the apricot kernels online, and they're pretty cheap. I mean, it's like 25 or 30 bucks for a whole big bag full of them. And you know, you compare that to the tens of thousands of dollars that they charge you to murder you with chemotherapy and radiation. It's a safe bet. I would at least, like, if you know anybody that's suffering with cancer, I would at least suggest that they try apricot kernels before going down the road of chemo and radiation. It certainly couldn't hurt. Okay, so I could go on and on illustrating this point, but I think it's clear. The world in its current state is severely fucked up, seemingly beyond repair, and frankly, we, as this generation currently, we had nothing to do with the path which humanity took to get us here. We certainly inherited a mess, which often leads us to contemplate suicide, right? Rather than witnessing to people who would just assume to kill you, or assume you kill yourself, than to teach them something important. Indeed, if things continue on at the same trajectory as they are for the past 100 years, then our grandchildren and their kids are just completely hopeless in terms of a happy and healthy future. It will only get worse at this rate, and the entities who hold hostage the heavens above would love nothing more than to torment another 1,000 generations of the sons and daughters of the Most High, whom he loves more than the very angels who created the realm so long ago. So something must change, and it will. It already is changing. It might take 100 years to see some real changes take effect, but the seeds have been planted, and the Holy Spirit is working, tearing through the spiritual crops, just waiting to harvest miracles abound, I think. And I hope that we can see some real effects of our work during our lifetimes, but I'm not so selfish as to give up if that is off the table, right? I do know that our descendants will carry the same spirit that is within you and me, and so their potential shot at a utopia in this world is perfectly reasonable of a goal to work towards, even if we get stuck dying in a ditch on the way. So hopefully this change will happen quickly, but if not, that's fine too, because we're talking about the future of our descendants who will certainly carry our essence with them in their walks. They could potentially exist in a world which is literally heaven on earth. The world as it was intended by the Most High, the world as I think it was at one point in the past before something happened and it was completely corrupted by jealous angels who fell from the Creator and took a huge chunk of the creation with them, holding the souls of God's beloved as hostage in the prison of flesh and worldly vices. The resurrected world will be a literal utopia where the Spirit of Christ will reign for 1,000 years without strife, war, or death. Artistic and musical efforts will be made new by entirely new colors, new sounds on the spectrum, and the spiritual capacity to resonate within a world without evil, deception, or injustice. That is the world that we were intended to inherit, and the only way that God is going to change anything is if we allow Him to work through us by relinquishing our will over to the will of the Most High, who is present whenever two or more gather in discerning the teachings of our Master, Yeshua. At any rate, this world and everything in it is screwed as it stands right now. I believe that had it not been for the intercession of certain angels of the Lord, we would have already experienced certain lamentations which we were spared, praise be to God. Call me crazy, but if you don't feel like we've all been given a second chance, even though we don't necessarily deserve it, maybe think about it again. I know for a fact that I shouldn't be walking this world alive, but by some miracle, I'm still here. I also know that many entities in this world deserve to have everything taken from them, their lives destroyed as punishment for their habitual inequities and crimes against their brothers and sisters. But for the sake of the elect and for the sake of the future of our people, the Most High has unleashed the Holy Spirit of love, discernment, and justice into the fields of our crop. People see the state of the world and wonder how God could stand idly by as this awesome creation spirals into obscurity and self-mutilation. The problem is, God lives within you and acts through us, the church. The Most High is purely of spirit, and as such, simply cannot operate in this physical realm. For the physical realm here exists within the mind of God. So it's literally impossible for him to show up here and start making things happen. I mean, he doesn't have a body, dude. Imagine a beach in your mind. Now, physically go to that beach and start digging up sand. I mean, that's not how it works. He is a different breed altogether. God don't have legs, so he can't walk here. That's what I'm saying. God is pure intelligence, pure love, and spiritual harmony personified. As sons and daughters of God, made in his image, it is our responsibility to bring this realm in line with the will of God, ultimately to usher in a literal heaven on earth. And for those of you who are going to bash me for using the word God, I don't care. I mean, it's the common vernacular, and so call it what you want. The Most High, creator of all things, God. Armies of angels stand by for our orders if we only knew how to call upon them. We can't do such things alone, but only as a group of immaculate faith, operating in harmony with nature and an understanding that we must act as the Most High's emissaries in this world, thus enabling God to operate in this realm through the proxy of our spiritual church, which has no buildings, books, or dogmas, other than the understanding that we unabashedly reclaim the authority over this realm, the heavens above it, and the underworld below as it was intended. The existing system obviously must go, and unfortunately, most people in this world would rather die than give up their comfortable prison cell, which they've grown to love and protect and really guard themselves from freedom. We must somehow overcome these existing structures of power which act as a bulwark for spiritual wickedness of authority who jealously sits over this world, hoping beyond hope that we don't realize the power which lies dormant within our church. The Most High and his angels will move mountains and upend the foundations of the world to ensure that we find the path to the new world. We're not permitted to use violence, but of course the armies of archangels are free to use all sorts of awesome weapons against the archons whom we oppose. Thanks to Christ's now secret work before his resurrection, he reinstated the high angels Leviathan, Yaldabaoth, and Samael under the authority of the Most High. These were fallen angels. They're now on the good team again, right? So in Sheol, Christ was able to act as judge over the hierarchy of demons who had been tormenting the souls of the saints for generations, as they were deceived into their wicked ways. He indeed, Christ, sentenced them to 1,000 years in the lake of fire before they could atone for their transgressions, but they have ultimately been forgiven. That sentence is now up, and they operate under the order of the angels of the Most High. So there are still very powerful entities in the seven heavens above who will not repent and relinquish their control over the world, but their days are numbered too. Their power is failing them, for their power relies on a litany of deceptions and lies which have now started to be exposed to the souls of this fallen world. In closing, invite the Holy Spirit to move through you and the people who you love. It can't hurt. It could potentially bring you miracles, revelations, and strength when you need it. The best way to fight against the beast system is to expose it. The biggest deception that this beast system has going on in the world is, in fact, the Baal Earth lies. Once that one is exposed, it's key. It's a linchpin. All the other shit they've spun comes crumbling down around that. So remember, our master never taught from a book. The King James Version Bible would be a laughable waste of paper, according to the Good Shepherd, I think. Our master taught from the heart through parables and did miracles to attest to the power of the Most High. So please be a follower of Christ as opposed to a Christian. Expose the darkness of evil with the light of the truth wherever and whenever you can. The world is filled with deceptions which fear this light. If you sacrifice your well-being or your comfort for the sake of the light of the truth, the Most High will shower your path with blessings and miracles. Guaranteed. It's a promise that he always keeps. So the only thing that we have to fear is complacence and really inaction. God does not help those who help themselves, as many people like to say, but instead, God walks with those who know him, and anything is possible when you walk with God. So as always, you guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to be a channel contributor, help me continue to make videos, there's links in the description to PayPal, Patreon, Cash App, Venmo, all the rest. So feel free to contribute whatever you feel this is worth. That is, of course, not obligatory, but completely optional should you choose to do so. My content is always free. I will never sell a thing in terms of content. Although I do have some merchandise down below this player window on YouTube. There's only a couple of designs in there, but I will start adding more designs if people start showing an interest in the shirts and hoodies and such. But let me know what you want to see, and I can make it happen. I can put it there. But that's a new thing that I've only just recently started doing, and if people like it, I can make more. So anyway, thank you guys. God bless. As always, spread the word, spread the world. Peace out, everybody. I'm done.